You're listening to a nerdy production. Warning, this is a nerdy production. Welcome to the GM Workshop. My name is Jacob. In this series, I want to talk to game masters and game designers all over the world, because I want to explore game mastering and the different perspectives in tabletop role-playing game. Let's get started. Welcome to the GM Workshop. My name is Jacob, and tonight we are talking to John Lamb. John Lamb is a game designer and expert GM. Have played roleplay since before I was born, and have some great perspective on the sci-fi genre, metagaming, and how to apply rules. So this is our themes. These are the themes tonight. And but first, as always, from USA, Texas, John, can you tell the listeners where you come from role-playing wise, and what are you working on right now?
I started off I'm 56, so I started off in 1977, right when Star Wars and everything else was coming out. So it was a good series of years.
Yeah.
The first couple games that I ever got to play were, of course, the little white box D&D. But then I immediately went into the first game I ever bought was Metamorphosis Alpha, and then I went right into Traveler, little black box Traveler, and then I bounced around a lot from that. And in specific, I have a fairly strong background in science fiction. And related with space opera and science fantasy and so forth.
Yeah.
But I did all the Star Treks, everything that was available, even the weird stuff like Jeroen and things like that. I played all of that. I got to run most of it and play most of it. And then as far as a structural fan base, everything that was available, I grabbed hold of it. It was Doctor Who and Star Trek, Star Wars, and novels. I read thousands of novels over the years. Being in the military, I'd bounce around, have all this spare time to just read and read and read. As an interesting side note, especially for metagaming, is that I ended up going in the engineering route for real life. A lot of the science fiction inspired me to take it further.
No, you won't get any XP.
So even though a person is playing an engineer and they don't know anything about engineering, it is helpful if the GM does know something about it. I mean, it's not required, but if you were to play in a science fiction game with me, or even a post-apocalyptic game, or something that would have some sort of technical reference, there's a lot of the information that I know about, whether it's scuba diving or working on drones or whatever. So as far as meta goes, it's pretty interesting to be able to apply that to your active gaming.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You actually took your hobby and your game mastering and your role-playing hobby into your real life, and not vice versa, as many people are doing. Actually, it's pretty cool. And as you said, it's helpful when you run, especially post-apocalypse or sci-fi games, and you can use your electronic know-how and help the players be more immersive into their roles, and try to use your knowledge to apply to the players. That's pretty cool twist on the game mastering, that's for sure.
That's the hardest thing for me to have learned up to this point, was that I had all this information, and when somebody said that they didn't know, it was hard for me to stop. But now I've learned to just give them enough so that they go, oh, that's really cool. And then you let it go because they don't want any more. Or if they'll say, I want to know more about that, we'll get together later or something like that.
That's pretty cool, yeah. I've been a soldier for 8 months, so I'm not an expert soldier or anything, but my little brother has been in Afghanistan and Iraq, and is a chief sergeant, and in tour of duties all over the world. So I have latched on to his experience in many regards, but it's pretty cool to use your knowledge in electronics and in military to to create stories for your players and help players immerse into their characters. That's pretty cool. Roll for initiative. The first time you found your system or your setting as a GM where you thought this is John's specialty, this is where you can create the best story. Which system and setting was this the first time you really felt this was the true way?
I have played so many different genres, but I would probably say Traveler. Yeah, I found that whenever you mention Traveler, the very first thing that people do is they regurgitate that one little bit of information. Oh, you can die in character creation. But it's silly because
yeah, it's fun.
I just explained this to someone yesterday. It's set up as a life path. You take your character up to a veteran status, and life can be dangerous. So if you've started creating a character and your stats, your statistics point towards a diplomat or a scientist or a doctor because you're very intelligent, you got a great deal of education, but you're not very strong, you don't have good agility, and you don't have good endurance, and you want to take that character through the process of being, say, a space marine, right? You want to be a marine.
Good luck, have fun.
Well, there's a survival roll on all of them. But for like a diplomat on 2d6, you'd have to roll a 2 to have a chance to die. And it doesn't mean you automatically die. Then you would roll again to see if something happened. If you have any of the bonuses that they ask for instance, say a diplomat, if you have intelligence of +1, you get to use that bonus. So you can never roll a 2. You're always going to roll a 3. So it's safe. You won't die. But if you went to the Marines, and the Marines require +2 strength, +1 dexterity, and +1 endurance, and you don't have any of that, and that you could die on a 4 or above, you have no bonuses. So if you stay in long enough, eventually you're going to have some bad luck. That's not on the game system. That's on you. Anyway, for Traveler, I found out early on that there were two types of players, and of course there's some blending, yeah, sure. But for the most part, the majority of the players liked the idea of being in space and flying ships and getting into conflicts and dealing with aliens or dealing with threats and for the most part just being a character in a science fiction book or a movie. And then the other group of people took the mathematics and the hard science that was introduced in, and they like to figure out the exact dimensions of a ship. They like to figure out the payload and how much it weighs and how does that affect your slingshots around a planet, and how soon you got to stop thrust, and it becomes more of an exercise of math than role playing. So you had the two groups, the role players and the ones that really love the math. So you typically in a Traveler group you would have a mix of the two. So it was an interesting time because I got introduced to Traveler by engineers, NASA engineers, who enjoyed the role playing. So even though they knew all of the math and they understood all the science, they instead focused on the role playing aspect of it. So I got to appreciate it from a completely different angle where I got to deal with all professionals. And they basically would just say, the math isn't important for this role playing scenario. The blend of aliens, again, I grew up, as a 12-year-old seeing Star Wars as my first movie that I got to go see.
Nice. Wow.
So the idea of growing up with Star Trek and Star Wars as the core of everything that I was, right? Not from video games or anything like that, but just all there was. There was nothing else really out there. You had to pull up books, and I would read lots of books. But the idea of aliens and mutants and all that really caught hold of me. So when I got to Traveler, they had the very tropish Aslan, which are the lion men, and the Vargur, which are the dog or wolf men, which are very common in a lot of science fiction. But then they had the really weird ones, like the Hivers. And I really gravitated towards the very unusual ones because they were truly alien. They weren't four-head aliens as in Star Trek. They were truly bizarre. And that drove my interest in biology. And that's why I ended up getting my master's degree in marine biology, was just the uniqueness of what you can find in nature that actually looks alien and behaves in an alien manner. So I got to apply a lot of that to my science fiction. So Traveler was the first one that I really felt comfortable with as a structure for role playing in my vision.
Yeah, and the first one you really creating stories where you have the depth and the flavor and everything you needed to evolve as a GM.
Right. That was the first, and I almost never used modules or adventures. and early on, it was because I didn't have any money. I was a kid. I was 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. I didn't have any money. Any money that I had went to, pizza and beer and all that. It wasn't for games. I was left with a huge brain and a great deal of creativity with no money. So it became second nature to create my own adventures and overlap stories that I had read and basically use whatever I had experienced up to that point. And then that carried over into, all the way up till now. I very rarely ever use anything that other people publish. I appreciate what other people publish. A lot of it, I just don't use it.
When you sit down with a group like this Friday example and a new group, how do you construct your campaign? What are you presenting to the players, and what agency do the players have in the story? Do you have access on this, or how do you do this?
I have been specializing in one-shots as I've been testing out my system the better part of 4.5 years now. So I've gotten pretty used to taking people that don't know anything about a given setting and trying to introduce it to them and allow them to bring as much of whatever they've got with them to it. So if I usually give them a foundation to start off with. Let's say that I found a group of players that what I like to do is I like to find a group that's already a group. You and your 3 friends, I want you to try my system. So what type of genre would you like to play? What theme would you like to play? And then I take the familiarity of that group. What I do is I present a basic, let's say, we'll say sci-fi. So with a sci-fi setting, I'll ask, do you want to go hard sci-fi? Mm-hmm. Try to keep it as much science as we can? Or do you want to introduce some aspects that you have to take with a grain of salt, like terraforming in your lifetime? You can take a planet that's completely dead, a planetoid, and make it into a viable planet within somebody's lifetime. That's not truly magic, and it does have a lot of science, but we're not anywhere near there. So it is pure science fiction.
Yes,
it's possible.
Yeah,
but it's unlikely. But it's still okay. Mm-hmm. We haven't gone too far. Right? And then when you start dealing with aliens, that's when it becomes interesting. 1,000 different alien civilizations, and we ran into one. The chances that we run into one that's at the exact same stage in their development as we are is impossible. There's no way it can happen. So we might find an alien civilization that's on decline and it's in complete anarchy and they're very primitive. Or they might not have gotten as far as we've gotten and they're also primitive. Or they may have been so far advanced that it's like humans, studying ants, and we're the ants. So the chances of running into somebody that we can deal with on a one-on-one basis, as like per Star Trek, right, is something you just have to accept as a little touch of fantasy, but not to the point of space magic.
Yeah, for sure. Or do we have any consideration what the characters might want to experience in this game, or do you have the framework and then you put the players' building blocks in order to try to find out which story you all want to tell? Because it's a cooperative game, but as the game master, you have to lay down some framework so you probably will do more work than the other players around the table, right?
Once we establish the technology level and the influence level and the resource level, We've decided that resources are fairly common, and the reason they're in space is because they want to. They're for some reason they want to be there. There's a reason they want to be out there. Then we establish one of the first things I would want to do is I focus on the characters themselves. So, what sort of directions do you want to go with? All humans dealing with the universe itself? You want to introduce like maybe one or two aliens that are not an option for a player character, but you deal with them. You want to deal with aliens that are player characters. You want to deal with a universe where you can't even know all the types of aliens. You run into a different type of alien every day. So once we've established that, then I've usually got a good feel for the people before we even start. So unless it's like a convention and people just wander up on me, if we're doing a campaign, I pretty much have already taken the steps to identify whether the people are going to get along with each other, whether we're going to actually have any fun together. So with that in mind, I've already done a little bit of probing beforehand, as you did earlier. So I just want to know if you want to deal with a lot of politics and you want to deal with a lot of diplomatic sort of things, then I would offer to go in a Dune direction where you have houses and corporations and so forth like that. And if that's not something to interest you, you'd rather deal with, space marines fighting, hordes and hordes of bugs or something, then we'd go in that direction. But I would ask each player through a series of conversations before we'd even sit down to have a general idea of the direction do you want to go with. And once we've established that, I like to be able to say yes. I would listen to what the players are saying, what their input is. And you're like, oh, that would make a really cool this or that. And then I would use that as my building blocks to start building the structure.
In this part, I will be a player in John's game, and after we have played the scene, we will pick it apart and disconnect all the systems and metagame aspects in the scene. Check our Facebook and Discord, GM Workshop, the podcast. Write to us and let us know what you like and what you don't like in the podcast. And if you want to talk to us on the podcast, please write to us. We are really anxious to hear more perspectives in role-playing game and game mastering. And please rate us in your podcast app. I want to do this improv gimmick we will use in the rest of the show. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm wearing my improv hat. I'm ready.
Put it on the sandboxy improv hat. That's yeah. I'm a player in your game, and my character is a captain on a small freighter. We are arriving at the space station, and there is something or someone dangerous in this space station. My character are delivering a package. I don't know what is inside the package. And now I want you to describe the scene when I arrive at the station and when I'm entering the common area in the station.
Sure.
Okay.
Before we go to that stage, there were a few things that you mentioned that I would probably explore before you even got to the station. And that's yes, if you're traveling from here to there, from point A to point B, mm-hmm. And I would look at your skill levels with your piloting, with your ship handling. And if you have basic skills, then I would do a check to see if anything offered a hazard or a complication en route. Then I would simply say a major situation happened that was unexpected in space, of some sort of anomaly. Due to your high skill level, you were able to avoid it and get right back on track. And then we get to the station. So when we got to the station, the first thing I would say is, why doesn't the character want to know what's in the box? Everybody wants to know what's in the box. So I would say right off the bat, I would offer it kind of like one of those things where you're on a bounty and you can bring them in dead or alive. If you bring them in dead, you get 1,000 credits. If you bring them in alive, you get 10,000 credits. So you want to bring them in alive. So what I would say is, the box is sealed. If you try to open the box, I'm only going to give you 1,000 credits. If it's undamaged and untarnished and completely pristine, I'll give you 10,000 credits. Now you have to decide, is it worth it to you to know what's in the box, or you just want to do your job?
The content of the box will dissolve in oxygen, so the parameters of open the box is more difficult.
Or it could be anything. It could be anything, any kind of warning or anything like that.
The option to earn 9,000 credits if I don't open it, that's just fine. both are fine. It's not. I don't want to dictate anything.
Okay. The potential for those storyline aspects present, because it could be the situation where you open the box and it all completely dissolved, and you still try to deliver the box, and then try to get away with it. But let's say that the character dealt with the anomaly. Due to skill and a decent challenge roll, they're all happy with themselves. They've decided to deliver the box pristine because they want the extra credits. They want the credits and they want the reputation of doing the job that was tasked to them, because it could result in something even better. So
it's a test.
Right, exactly. So the character has arrived onto the station. The station has complications as far as being out on the fringe. It's maybe not in the best of shape. Maybe some of the people there are corrupt, and maybe some of the people there are nefarious and maybe even malignant. You as the player, we'll say Captain Jacob. Captain Jacob, you get to the station and you dock without issue.
Yeah.
And then I would do a challenge check for intuition. And if you succeeded, I would tell you there should have been complications, because you know that every time you dock at the station, it requires a bribe. It did not ask for the bribe. Okay, so that automatically, now you have a warning. Now, if you failed, I wouldn't tell you that, but I would know that. So you succeeded in your piloting. You succeeded in delivering the box to the station, at least, and you've succeeded in the fact that you've gained insight that they did not. That's very curious. Why didn't they? But when you enter the station, you find that the hallways through this particular tube leading to the main station are unoccupied. Nobody there to meet or greet you. There's nobody there from security. There's nobody there from...
And no beggars or bums. Or...
There's nothing. There's nothing there at all. The hallways are cleared. You basically have the choice of taking the long way around and going to your point of location, or you can take the short and most direct path. Yeah,
that's for sure. I'm a bit worried about the bribe issue, and so I might try to sneak around and try to find another way into the common area or the main station area.
Very good. So we would look to see if you had any skills like streetwise or anything like that. If you didn't, then we would just we would role play it and then have a pretty high challenge to find out. And in fact, let's say you had a critical success, and very exciting. You got a very critical success, and the critical success allows you to actually run into somebody. This particular somebody is a nobody, and the reason that they're still there is because they weren't worth security coming back for them a second time, even though they told them to leave. I really can't get along very well. Do you have a few credits?
I will try to read him and then...
Do you offer this person a few digital credits, or you just tell them to go on about it?
Give him some change, not much, but just to recognize him as a person.
Just for that sake, I don't even need to make a roll, because any sort of positivity would be welcome. This particular person is not so much a con artist. They're just somebody that's down on their luck. So they let you know that security came through. The actual station security came through. And they said they had to clear everything out. So it doesn't look good for you, my friend. And he shuffles back into the shadows.
And I would probably move into the main area and be more aware of the area's movement in the area.
By doing so, by taking that direction and taking the cautious approach, when I would ask for a perception check, rather than giving you a bonus, I would let you roll with advantage, which is what I typically do. That's something very foolhardy. I have them roll with disadvantage. And if they succeed, then it's even better. And if they do something that's intelligent and it makes sense in a linear fashion, then I let them roll with advantage. And it gives them a chance to, one, have a better roll, and two, let them know that I acknowledge that I appreciate their thinking. I like the direction you're going with it. Whether it's valid or not, I still like the direction you were thinking. So you get to roll with advantage. We'll assume that you've made good perception check. You do know the location. you do have a little digital map of where to go. And there is an individual sitting on the promenade at a table by themselves. Nobody else seems to be around. But because you had advantage, you ended up getting a very high, not quite a critical success, but a high success. So you see at least two people attempting to hide from you within view, and you note that those are really good places to shoot from protected cover. So it looks like your point of contact is waiting for you, and there's at least two people that are there to provide support or security. But it is a curious thing, because if it was just straight up bodyguard security, why aren't they down there with him? What's your next step?
I will take the chance and take the move to this table. Try to move through cover, or at least make the possibility to dive behind cover if possible. And therefore, I will try to talk to this guy still standing and make sure he sees me and sees the package, and moving with caution.
So you're taking a defensive position, but still standing on your feet. All right. So he calls you over, and he's laughing, and he pours you a drink. He provides a small glass that comes out, pours you some unusual looking fluid. We'll say it's a bright pink that glimmers like the aurora borealis when it's in the glass. He's offering you to come have a drink. And you see him wave away the 3 or 4 people now that you can see from this angle that are standing around with guns. Yeah. So they all take a relaxed position as you approach.
They lower the guns and shoulders.
Right. And so he says, "I see that you haven't opened the box." And then he puts a little device on the table with a little flashing light. So now you know that had you opened the box, it would have indicated on his little remote.
And the guns will probably kill me.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
You get there, and I know you have other things to talk about. So you get there, and the long story short is it was a test. There's nothing in the box.
No.
You open up the box, and they told you that it would dissolve, right? Mm-hmm. So had you opened the box, there would be nothing in the box, but you would have thought it disintegrated, when in fact there was nothing there. And had you showed up, then they would have shot you.
For sure.
Now that they showed that you've shown that they can trust you, now they offer you the real job that's worth 250,000 credits, which will cover you for 6 months of mortgage on your craft, as well as all of your other debts, and it'll put you in the green as far as it is. And then he offers you another job that you can team up with these other people, and that's how I introduce the other players to the situation.
Woohoo! And I didn't die in character creation as a good travel character. That's pretty cool, Indeed. John. The metagame aspects in this scene, I will try to pick them out. The first, you let the player use the system to make them uncomfortable in the situation. The piloting skill, the computer skills, and so on.
Right.
And when I entered the station, you described for me the tube that was cleared, and no beggars, no officials, no gangsters, nothing to invite me in, and the bribe aspect in the scene as well make me as a player, my character will be uneasy in the routes, and as I did, I tried to find another way to the main station. Lured me that direction instead, or you created some preconception that I had to think how to move through this station, right? That's some of the aspects I just picked up from here. Do you have any other important details you want to enlighten us with?
Well, based on the groups I've been putting through here in the last few years, a handful of players who consistently avoid danger by playing gambits as per chess. And when given that situation of you step off the ship and you didn't have to pay the fee and there's nobody around, half of them would have gone back in the ship.
Yeah.
Locked it, and then tried to communicate with the person to let them know that it looks like a trap and they wanted to make other arrangements or something along those lines, take a different.
Yeah.
And then some of the others would have said, to hell with it. I'm just going to go walk down the middle of the hallway, walk right up to them and hand them over this box, because that was the arrangement. They'd be all brazen. which the bad guy would have approved of that. He would have thought that was great, like, I love it. I love the attitude. I love the brazenness, right?
Yeah.
So it could have gone in several different directions, and I would have offered something in any of those situations. I would have tried to feed into it, because again, what I have found is different for me gaming as a GM now than in 20, 30 years ago, is that I learned a long time ago that the idea of me against you doesn't equate to fun. And I think a lot of people go into the role-playing games as if they're a video game. And it's not the idea that you're trying to win. It's more so that you're trying to, and it's not even the very soft-natured collaborative storytelling, right? It's not a narrative game. I mean, there are characters that could die and all this. There are hassles in there, but I do like the story aspect and a cooperative nature for constructive purposes. I like to take what the character's given me, and I'll shift things slightly to feed into what the character's doing to make it more viable for their direction if it makes sense. Like, there was nobody in those hallways, but in the context of what we were describing and how cautious you were, you gained advantage. So I could easily see a favor coming your way. In this particular case, the favor could have been an individual. It could have been a secret text on your phone. Somebody owed you a favor. If you had approached the station and you told me, hey, I've got 3 contacts as far as my character creation, could I have one of my contacts at the station? I'd be absolutely. And then when you approach the station, you'd get a text from that person, hey, look out, you're setting it up for a trap. I don't know any other details, but be real careful. Something along those lines. And try to feed into whatever the characters were bringing to the table. So as far as extra stuff, no, you played it right on target. And it could have gone several directions. If you'd have taken the long way around, you'd eventually gone through a hatch, and then the next hatch, there'd be lots of people, and they'd be going on about their normal business, and you'd have faded into the crowd, and you'd work your way all the way back around, and you'd have come up the back way of where you needed to go, and you would have heard the rumors, and you would have got this, you could have got a drink, all this. And then the guy would have said, why'd you take so long? And then you'd have to explain yourself, and, well, I knew you didn't open the box, and sit down, and it would have been a different approach, but that you did exactly what was required of you on the timeline that was required, and that you were cautious, not overly cautious, not scared, but cautious, which is a good thing because what he's asking you to do is illegal. So being slightly cautious and doing the job the right way has value. So no, yeah, you played it spot on.
Yeah, it wasn't really important that I make the right choices or one in this scene. I'm curious about the snipers. Can you elaborate on why you are using those, and what was the thought about the snipers and the tension you want to build up?
Because psychology, I think, plays into a lot of what the players do. If we're playing in a game and I offer you a few clues and they don't bother you in any way, and I don't feel you're in the game. I really don't feel you're participating as far as like enjoying yourself. You're not really into it. You basically just want to fight. I just want to go kill stuff, right? So I probably wouldn't have started the game with you anyway to begin with. I'm just not into those sort of games. But I tried to give you a couple things that if I told you, I want to see how you react, is how I'm going to take the next step of what we're doing. I try to leave myself a little bit of fluidity of what I can do with the story, because not everybody is good or bad, and not everybody is going to be chaotic or full of order. So depending on how you play it, I want that to reflect. So by telling you that there was no bribe requested, you could have said, well, hey, the person knew I was coming and they paid for it ahead of time. Good for them. You're coming into it with a lot of enthusiasm, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's cool." That's not correct, but we'll just say that was a good thing, right? So you go in there with a very positive attitude, right? that's the character, that's great. That gives you a chance to role play in the face of danger, right? Which would be really cool. It would be a very good character thing to do. And then the other one, like I was saying, you could have gone back in the ship. You could have done that because of an established amount of danger. And then the fact that the hallways were cleared. I'm trying to establish little Legos to build up a wall of suspicion or caution. And I feel that letting the player feed into their own anxiety and their own worries tells more of a story than I could give them with every detail. I don't need to tell you a lot of stuff because you're already freaked out, right? You just want to get from here to here without, tripping and falling. So now you're actually worried.
I like the concept when you're using show don't tell. You wouldn't tell me, hey, Captain Jacob, you feel like this and this. That's not cool. And use the system mechanics surrounding my piloting skills. I thought that was important for the furthermore story, and I was aware of this. And in the case of the bribery, I thought about three things. One is the obvious one, that the gangster paid for my landing fee. Or the second one was the law enforcement would arrest me as soon as I delivered the package or left the space station. The third one was that I actually fumbled or missed my intuition roll. That was pretty cool and gave me some anxiety, as you talked about before.
No, I think you got it, and I actually appreciate that you took it to heart in like three different directions, because it was an open-ended potential of what it could be. What I like to do with a lot of situations is, this is the way it is. I know that this is the way it is, and I present some of the information, and how you interpret it, it could be something completely different. But if you don't deal with it, then that situation is going to carry on in a natural process. So if you delayed too long, he's not there anymore, and now you have failed. And now they're actually hunting you, and you've got to try to get off the station. You get to your ship, and it's locked. It's in dry lock now. You can't get it out. So now it's a survival thing. So everything has ramifications. So the fact that you didn't delay it very long, you didn't keep him waiting, that you basically kept to your job, all that stuff has value. So I like that you looked at it several different ways. I wouldn't require it of a player to look at it all these different ways, because it could eat up a lot of time. But I do appreciate that.
That's the reason I'm a terrible player, because I deconstruct in every scene and everything my game master always tell me, and probably over-analyzing. And this gimmick was to analyze it and try to pick out the details you are using and how you are telling this scene's flow. And of course, if I was in the mood and was a player around your table, I will not consider 3 or 5 options when you said something about bribes and something like that. But as a player and as a GM, you have to help the GM telling the story. Well, that's a failure. The story is what drives the characters and the story with the other characters. I like to bring it in like the Alien movie. If they land and they saw the X in the first Alien movie and just left, it will be a pretty boring story. Do you have any thoughts about letting your players into a false security, or pushing the players to know, hey, this is the story, don't get back in your ship and fly away? How do you do this? Do you imply some kind of meta knowledge for the players so they have a false meta security knowledge, or do you have any other tools to try to help the players into the story?
The only time I would metagame in that particular case is if, let's say, you were playing a character that does not reflect well on your personal real-world skill. Let's say you chose a character that was very good at detection, being an investigator, somebody that was very good at reading other people's faces. They were, in general, they were a profiler. They're good at figuring people out. That doesn't mean that you personally have to be good at that stuff, but those skills would be reflective. So if you had the skills, it would feed into information that I could give you then I would let you have those skill rolls, and I would ask you for those skill rolls. Now, I wouldn't necessarily be very specific on why you're doing the skill rolls, but it would be one of those things where, let's say you had 3 contacts, but you didn't ask me about a contact for the station. Let's say it slipped your mind, right? You get to the situation and I tell you that you've landed and that they don't require a bribe. You open the door and the hallways are clear. You go, I'm completely freaked out. I'm getting out of here. And you go back into your ship. Then I, at that point, knowing your character, would say you get a text message from one of your contacts who happens to just be on the station. So that would remove one of your contacts. So the advantage that comes from that contact is gone. And it would say, hey, it's a trap. So-and-so knows you're here. It's a big deal. If you don't make arrangements to deliver that box, you're going to be hunted. If you still choose to leave, then you leave. And then we deal with the situation later. But now you can look at it a different way. But if you didn't have the contacts and you didn't have the skills for it, and let's say you were just a big dumb Marine, right? You're just a guy that's really good at shooting stuff. Well, unfortunately, your skill set doesn't pay forward. So if you choose to turn around and leave because you think it's a dangerous situation, then it is what it is. Then the storyline changes, and the added drama that happens from that point on is on you. So no, I would not metagame unless the character presented a reason to do so. If you look into the shadows and you forget that you have the ability to see infrared, well, I'm going to remind you. I'm going to say, hey, roll with disadvantage for your infrared. And you go, my infrared, I forgot about that. And whether you succeed or fail, I reinforce the fact that you have infrared vision. And now you're going, now, okay, I'm going to take a second and recoup and try this again. And I'd be like, okay, well, you rolled normal. But if you didn't have anything, if you built your character to be a certain way, and now they're doing a job that they're not well suited for, things can go south. So to answer your question in a short, long version, yes, I would give them meta information or give them an opportunity to gain some meta information if they had the skill set or the character set to do so. But if they didn't, then it's just unfortunate timing and bad luck.
Another thing I want to pick up on before we end our great conversation here, John. You use the system and the character sheets a lot when you tell stories. And as a metagame knowledge, you help the players understand the setting, and you use the system to make a wall between the role and the player. I like that a lot because some systems are dedicated to have dumb stats as a bad word, and some systems doesn't care about how you play your character, and some game masters don't care how you play. As the rough example is the oversmart orc barbarian. Because the player who plays it is a Mensa student, and he wants to play a dumb Conan barbarian with 6 intelligence, right? So, but he's still intelligent. The way you are using the character sheets, you are using the meta knowledge and using it into the story, because you are helping the players to understand the setting, but you can also use their character sheets to trip them or to cheat them into believing something else. As we talked about this, the bribe detail, where I shortly thought that it was me that failed the role, and therefore you cheated me into belief that it was something wrong and make me nervous and so on. I really liked you did in this scene especially. Do you always use the character sheets a lot and a lot of roles or do you often just use the stats because roles often gives rule arguments or rule decisions from you and so on? Do you use the sheets like Old World of Darkness is a great example. You have some key stats and some skill stats, and they put those two together. When I play that, I often don't use the roles, that don't care so much about the actually role, but as a character sheets, it's fine to have it as a meta knowledge. How do you use this in both in a constructive way in storytelling, and how do you use it to cheat your players?
I mentioned that if your skill set exceeded the threat level, the challenge level, then you automatically succeed. And that I would narratively reward you by patting you on the back and saying, good job. Your skill set presented that there was an anomaly there. You avoided the anomaly with a great deal of skill and got right back on track and didn't lose a minute of time, right? Or it could have been that you lost some time and now you're a little bit late, but nothing happened to your ship. Or you stayed on time and something happened to your ship that you got to deal with. There's also kind of situations that could have resolved, but basically, I don't have the characters roll all the time if I know that it's something that they should be good at. So if your character is just a modern society character in the modern world, we'll assume somebody lives in a city and they have the basic knowledge that everybody in the city would have. Let's say in let's just say Copenhagen. Copenhagen. So you live there. I'm going to assume, based on the knowledge that I've got as a person, just experiencing things, the average citizen speaks 2 or 3 languages. That would just be what I would assume, that most of them speak fairly fluently 2 or 3 languages, or at least understand 2 or 3 languages. They're good. They're exactly right. At least 2. That they can drive a car. They probably have a bicycle. They're good with a cell phone, and they have decent academic skills because everybody got to go to school pretty much as far as they would like to go to school. So if a challenge came up for you to drive a car and it was sun shining, there was no ice on the road, and there was no weather conditions, and there's not very much traffic, I'm not going to have you roll against a skill check to go from here to there, even if it's a road trip, right? Now, if it's to the point where you've driven past reasonable endurance, now you're tired, and it's dark, and it's snowing, and now it's turned to sleet, and there's black ice on the road. Those are all challenges that would equal up to a high challenge at disadvantage. Now you have to do a roll. So I don't always ask for a roll if it's something I expect you to be able to do. And if you're a master archer and you want to shoot a target and hit the bullseye, you hit the bullseye. Congratulations. Because that's what your character does. You're very good with a bow. Now, if you want to split somebody else's arrow, well, that's a difficulty factor. And there's a fair chance you'll still be able to do it, but now you have to at least make the effort, right, to do it. So the only time that I would actually do challenges like that are if there is an actual challenge. Now, as far as tricking players, I very often ask them to make a roll that doesn't mean anything, just to make them anxious, just to throw them off. Because if I do that, then they don't come to expect every roll to mean something. Because if I don't do that, then they'll say, okay, you had me roll, and even though I failed, now I know something is up, right? But if I have you roll from your flight from A to B and you failed, and I say, okay, nothing happened, they'll be like, oh no, something happened. I'm going to slow the ship down, and I'm going to do a quick systems check to make sure there's nothing wrong with the ship. So I succeeded, and with that one little thing, I'm okay with it. I don't need to make a bigger deal out of it. And then I'm going to have you, when you're docking, I'm going to have you succeeded in your docking roll. And I'm like, I'm going to need another docking roll. You're going to be like, why? So I just need another docking roll. Okay, I failed. Okay, no problem. Oh, and now you have anxiety because I asked you to do it again. But for the most part, I don't ask for a lot of rolls. So when I do ask for a roll, the players pay attention. They know that either something is up or I'm messing with them. And if I'm messing with them, then they still know that something is up. So that it makes them pay attention. And I try to get people involved. So specifically, if there were 5 players, 1 or 2 of them are going to be quiet. That's just the way it normally is. One of them is the first person to always talk. The other two typically argue amongst themselves. And then the other two are fairly quiet and they'll react when they're required to do so. So if we were traveling from A to B and there were 5 people on the ship and an anomaly popped up, I wouldn't challenge the aggressive pilot. I wouldn't challenge the really good science officer. And I wouldn't challenge the engineer. I would challenge the diplomat or I would challenge the escort because they're very quiet. I would come up with some sort of challenge that meant something to them to get them involved in the game. All right, I'm going to need the diplomat to make a skill because the area that you're traveling through has a lockdown and it requires a certain level of security clearance or above. And although your diplomat doesn't have it, he's got or she's got diplomatic connections. So I need a connections role from your diplomat. And so instead of making it a mechanical thing or a piloting thing that they could have easily succeeded in, it becomes a diplomat thing, which the diplomat can very easily succeed. So the diplomat's like, I've got a 7 in diplomatics. So boom, yeah, I did it. I succeeded. I got a critical success. So not only do they get through, but they get an escort. That's that sort of thing. So I try to feed into it that way. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, for sure. Oops, you're dead. When we're looking at the metagame in settings which are very defined, like Aliens and Star Wars and Star Trek and so on, how do you work with metagame in those situations? You are creating a lot of your own stuff, but you also pull a lot of inspiration from other IPs and so on. Where do you set the borders for the players surrounding metagame in sci-fi?
Well, if you want to focus on the sci-fi and the metagaming as a final thing, I would say that a lot of people don't have a great deal of experience, practical experience with engineering and high-end technology. They do have a great deal of experience with movies and video games and TV series and comics and so forth, and they can understand how a transporter works, even though they don't understand how electronics works. So as far as metagaming, as long as a person has the skills to reflect some sort of connection to the problem, then metagaming makes sense and it's an effective tool. If the GM is just using it to make his story work, then I would say it's not a good tool, regardless of the genre. And if you're running a group of people that don't know anything about science fiction, then probably easing them into a different situation, very little science fiction would be best, where they don't need to know a whole lot. Right.
Yeah, but it's fine, and it's a great tool to redefine the module which Freeliga have made, the called Cherry of the Gods. They do a bit of the same here, as it's a sickness instead of a face hugger. But the end game is the same. You get impregnated by this alien thingy, and it will kill you from inside out. But it has another mechanical flavor, and that's pretty cool. When you're using a fixed setting as Aliens or Star Wars, the players, they want the force powers, they want the Jedis, they want the tractor beams and the teleport chambers in Star Trek and so on. You're also confined to deliver the tropes and the iconic elements in the setting. So it's a difficult balance, and in a balance you have to navigate through.
A tool for the alien setting in particular is that everybody knows that the alien starts off as this, and then becomes a face hugger, and then becomes a larva, and then becomes the actual drone. So what I did was I introduced another stage. Okay. And this next transition stage was after they became active drones. They would go into a cocoon, as it were, and they would reappear, not necessarily, big and bad like a queen, but they would be modified based upon their environment. So they might be more aquatic, or they might be more terrestrial, where they're digging a lot or something like that. They might be smaller, they might be bigger. And So if they get to the point, they're like, okay, if we get them to this stage, we know what's going on. And then they go back into the setting. Now it's completely different. And they're like, oh, what is this? Or I went the other direction and I made them not face huggers, but in fact, I made them small, like the size of rats. And they would just latch on to the body. And wherever they latch on, they would start pumping in these hormones, and they would put pumping in these paralytics so that you get 4 or 5 of them on you and you can't move anymore. And then one of them comes up and lays an egg in your mouth. So now they're completely freaked out because it's something they don't know, even though they're familiar with the setting. Use the metagame knowledge against them.
I have this example. I've used it before in the podcast, but I have written a campaign in called Divinity Lost, and one of the scenes, the players are moving into a Proud Boys encampment in the US to find this nasty angel thingy. And the players are not Trump fans and not Proud Boy fans at all. Right. So the preconception of these people are they are bad and assholes and so on. So I use this preconception to mess with them because they actually have to use the Proud Boys in a constructive way to find this angel, and they have to cooperate with these Proud Boys. That was pretty fun. They thought, oh, the Proud Boys, that is the antagonist in this scene, but it wasn't. It was actually their allies. That was pretty fun. Cool, John. I haven't got anything more for you, and it was pretty cool to talk to you and learn a lot about system in the metagame and find the balance between the scene and the players and all the other details went through. This is commercial for you. Do you have any projects or things we could put on a stand for you here in the podcast so people might find you, and you will send me some links so that I could put in the show notes afterwards, of course.
I'm right at the end of finishing up my game system, M5. And it is a multi-genre RPG, and I took a different direction with it. And I kind of touched bases with a few of the things when we were talking about it, in that I've got 24 books written, and I'm finishing up the artwork for all of them. It's kind of my final opus of everything that I've collected in my brain from gaming and designing and all the artwork and everything in the whole time I've been gaming. And I found a comfortable way to make it all work intuitively. And I've been keeping it real close to the vest. I've put 313 people through it so far, and they've all enjoyed it. I've gotten a lot of good feedback. I haven't dealt with a lot of difficult players because I just don't have a lot of time to waste on it. I'm to the point now that I'm putting together the quick start rules and some stuff to hand out. But if anybody's interested in playing it, and to the point of making a character, that's what I first say. I say just give me an hour to sit down with you and make a character. It doesn't take an hour to make a character, but I have to explain certain things because it's different. It's just a little bit different because it's more of a cooperative way to make a character. I'll be your career counselor, and I want to help you make a good character. Let's work together to make the vision come together. And it's not so much as in you spending some points or you just narratively writing down what you want it to be. There are some risks, but you can mitigate the risks. And you can choose whether to build on something that you already have or add something new. And you end up with a character that is unique. If 5 of us were to build the same character in context, it's impossible for them to be the same. You just can't do it. So M5, and it's men, machines, mutants, magic, and monsters. That's what the 5 M's are. And I did that because I tried to be able to explore all aspects of the various genres. That's why I got 24 books. I did not start off wanting to write 24 books. Believe me, it just worked out that way. And the way that it's set up is that any character from any of the book could go and play in any of the other games without any adjustments or modifications. If you can narratively put it together. So if you wanted to take somebody from a fantasy setting and put them into a modern setting, it's fairly easy. You make it like a Dresden, and you bring over the orcish fighter, or you bring over the wizard, or whatever it is. So as long as you can make it make sense narratively, the system works on all the genres and you can cross.
We will find some links and maybe some possibility to, maybe through our Discord channel and our Facebook page, you can link some places where contact you and try to create these characters and maybe play with you online. But again, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for today, and thank you to John for joining us. This is our last episode on sci-fi for now. Next week, it's fantasy all week and the following weeks. Follow us on Facebook, GM Workshop, the podcast. If you want to interact with us and talk to us, give us a message.